Well, one of the most expensive developments for the shuttle was the space toilet. Each mission they are retaught because unfortunately the UMS machine, the urine measurement system, is very old and cumbersome, and learning to program it takes about 5 minutes, and so going to the toilet can be a 10-minute episode just to have a quick pee. And if there's 7 of you lining up, you know, it's something you want to do efficiently. You don't want to be number 7.
You guys have a good mission. Yep, the MMT is looking, no issues. You're cleared to launch. Copy there.
Weather forecast in downtown Houston. Partly cloudy and
I'm clear, Houston. Okay, another quick indication.
I'm clear. We may drop in and out.
shadow traffic telling us on Cullen near the University of Houston.
Copy. Okay, go for probes.
We can pick up Milo at about Mach 11.
Copy.
Hello, I'm Dr. Vaughan Clift, and I work here at the Johnson Space Center, where I develop medical technology, and I play with astronauts. I put experiments on board the Space Shuttle and on board the Russian space station Mir, and shortly on board the International Space Station. Unfortunately, I'm the only Australian working here at the Johnson Space Center permanently, and it would be nice if there were others who came and took part. Exploration of space is one of the most exciting adventures that human beings can do, and unfortunately Australia takes no part in it. We're not part of the International Space Station, and we at the moment have no experiments on board either the shuttle or any space vehicle. And I'd hope to show you a little bit of the excitement and enjoyment of working here and the things that we do, and the hope that someone else may join me.
And we have liftoff of the Space Shuttle Columbia on an international life science and microgravity mission.
Building 9 is one of the most interesting buildings on site. It's where the mock-ups are for all the space station and shuttle trainers and things like that. This is the full-scale fuselage trainer that they use to teach people where things are and what to do on board the space shuttle. The only difference between it and the real shuttle is it has no wings. And we use this to teach crews, to show them where things are, where to find our experiments, how not to break them, and what they have to do during a mission. Well, welcome to the flight deck, and it is the heart and soul of the space shuttle in some ways. This is where we can fly it from, land it, launch it, control the Canadarm, dock with satellites, dock with the Hubble Space Telescope, and dock with the Mir space station.
We're with you during engine start. Techno range shuttle.
One of the things I think people don't realize is how small the whole flight deck is and how old it is. It doesn't really look any more sophisticated than the cockpit of some planes built in the 60s and 70s. All the switches are guarded so the crew members can actually walk on them without doing them any harm, because in microgravity, this might be the floor, or this might be the floor. And in fact, most of them orient themselves by the time they've been up in space 2 or 3 days to the fact that wherever their bottom is, that's the ground. Very few of the experiments I do on the ground and very few of the pieces of equipment I use on the ground work in microgravity. And one of the benefits to someone like me with an inventive lilt is that I have to reinvent the wheel. I have to work out how to make a test tube work in space. I have to work out how to make a blood pressure cuff work in space. And because of that, we've discovered and built devices that are much more applicable to the ground and actually have very broad and very general application to normal life and normal medicine, even though we designed them to solve a peculiar problem. Building 37, well, it's the place I live in most of the time. It's where I do most of my work. Well, you're now in the endocrine lab, which is one of the many labs here at Johnson Space Center. And this is the lab where we've developed 2 technologies, dried blood and dried urine. And I'd like to introduce you to Mrs. Fields and Mrs. Trell. Mrs. Libby Trell, Mrs. Eden Fields. And over the last 5 years, we've developed the dried blood technology to fly on board the space station. This This is one of the devices we developed at the Johnson Space Center, and it's really a device to replace a vacuum collection tube for testing blood. These tubes do two things. They allow us to collect blood, and then they go into a centrifuge to spin the sample to give us the serum part, which is the part we do the measurements on. And this device does exactly the same thing. Blood comes down the tubing into the chamber, separates across this filter, and is collected on a simple piece of cloth or paper and dried for storage. The importance of that is that we don't need to use a freezer, we don't need any power, we don't need to have extra equipment on board the shuttle or on board the space station.
This is the treated, patented filter that we use to filter the blood, and I'm gluing them, hot gluing them into the device itself. So this is it. And in the back is the absorbent paper that the serum goes on, and you just put that in the back here and close it up, and then it's ready to be used.
This building was the original building that the Apollo 11 crew came to when they returned back from the moon. In testing any of the blood-related products here, we have to be part of the test subject pool, which means we get tested for HIV at every 6-month intervals, which is very frustrating because it means you can't have sex for 6 months until the next test. But
You can't have sex for 6 months.
after our HIV test. Is this going to hurt?
Yes.
What you can see is how the device fills, and it fills just like this in microgravity as well, which is good. Fluids and air don't go well in microgravity.
I won't forget the tube.
It's got tremendous applications in the real world. It has an estimated commercial market of just under $2 billion. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, approached NASA about using these devices in a large HIV study in Uganda. And another group wanted to use it from CDC for measles screening. We normally leave them standing up, so they look like little tiny space shuttles on the launch pad.
Roger, we copy, go.
Well, one of the most expensive developments for the shuttle was the space toilet, affectionately known as the WCS, or Waste Containment System. And it also provides some degree of privacy. This is something to remember, isn't it? Basically, your bottom is sucked down onto this seat, and while it's sucked down onto that seat, it provides enough airflow for you to be able to defecate and collect it in the pan if you need to. This is the urine collection system, and it has a funnel which is placed here, and you can urinate into this. Obviously, that's its main function. It also can be connected up to a device which is used to measure the urine volume, because one of the most important parameters we'd like to know is how much urine the crew have actually passed, and it's called the UMS system, and it sits over here in the corner when it's on board. What we have here is one of the experiments to go on board the Russian space station Mir. And this experiment is designed to collect urine. And one of the things we have to spend a great deal of time doing is training the astronauts to pee in this little tiny hole. No, we don't really do that at all. What we do is collect urine in a standard condom drainage bag, or urine collection device. And these are designed to be drained from. There's a valve at the very end, a little one-way valve, and it's not that the astronaut was particularly sick. We actually used blue water, and the device is simply connected up to the urine collection device, and then using a normal 20mm syringe, we actually suck the urine onto the paper card. If you want to study something like bone loss or renal stone formation, the urine is one of the best analytes we have. The calcium and phosphorus from the bone that comes out of the astronauts is filtered through the kidney and comes out in the urine. One of the most important developments from spaceflight is the fact that astronauts lose up to 2% of their bone mass per month, which is tremendous. It's thousands of times higher than you normally see in women post-menopause. If you wanted to study how good a drug was, you could study it on an astronaut over a month and get the same results that would normally take you 5 years and 5,000 women. So it's a wonderful research opportunity, which unfortunately no Australian researcher is involved in.
If we're going to send somebody for a long duration into space, like to go to Mars, it is important that we understand how the body handles being without gravity. We have some very interesting data from our American astronauts and the Russian cosmonauts who've been in space for a long time, and it doesn't seem that we have come up with an exercise protocol yet that reduces the amount of bone loss that you have, the amount of calcium that comes into your blood. So anything that he can devise that helps us learn to do that will be a benefit.
This, to the non-educated mind, is a funnel, but to the NASA mind is a transition module, fan, motor, blower, odor, bacterial filter. The urine cards, once filled with urine, are slid into this drying box and then it's turned on. Well, where we're going now is commonly known as the chamber. It's really the integrated test subject facility, and you probably heard the saying, in space no one can hear you scream. Well, we stick people in a chamber for 60 to 90 days and lock them away. They're sealed in, and we recycle their water, we recycle the air, and we're using the urine that they put out and some of the blood they put out, and we take from them, to study how their bodies adapt. Watch your head. Hello.
Hi there.
Hello. I'm Vaughan Clift, and you are?
I'm Karen Myers.
Hello, Karen. I just want to ask you a little bit about what you do here and to explain one of the experiments we want to do. First of all, where are we?
Well, we're presently standing on the first level of the chamber that I lived in with 3 other crew members during the 60-day closed chamber test. The first level primarily houses our general work area and crew eating area, and a place where we spend a lot of time together down here. It also houses about 1/3 of our hardware in here, this being primarily the water recycling hardware in this area. We have a full bathroom over on this side of the chamber. I can take you in and show you a little bit of that.
One of the things we do, Karen, is we've developed an alternative way of storing urine, so we don't have to freeze it. So can you tell us how a crew member needs to recycle their urine, what you need to do, and I'll tell you how it might interface with our equipment.
Yes. The urine collection system starts with a funnel on the top and a tube running down into a catch system down here. In the tube are chemicals that begin the breakdown of the urine. During the 60-day test, we actually urinated into graduated cylinders, measured the volume of each void, and then took a small sample of that and sent it outside to the docks for them to evaluate.
Right. Well, on Space Station, we'll have a similar urine collection system, but we don't have the advantage of a graduated pipette because you can't get the urine just to sit down on the bottom of the flask.
Sure.
So we'll be using bags. Will we be able to get the crew members to pee into a bag and then to empty that bag into that?
Yes. We're going to go up to the second level.
Glad I didn't wear my skirt.
Me too, actually. Last week I did. I still smell it before me.
It's a lot further than it looks.
Yeah. Takes a little practice.
What do we do up on this level?
Well, the second level of the chamber is primarily dedicated to air recycling hardware. That will actually blow the carbon dioxide apart into carbon and oxygen. Hello. We're on the third level of the chamber now, which has the crew quarters where we all kept our personal items and slept and did some work, and also a half bath.
So what do you do in a half bath that you can't do in a full bath?
Using some of the facilities in this chamber takes a little bit longer than it might normally at home. So if folks are downstairs on the first level having a shower or taking care of shaving or oral hygiene, it's nice to have a second bath for the other crew members to use if they need to urinate as well.
Well, in our system, we're going to be using urine, obviously. We could set the system up in here. It'll go into most confined spaces. I'm not too sure what we're going to do with the serum, but certainly the urine's easy to do. Now, I'd like to show you something. This building has the unpresupposing name of Cecil. We saw a chamber before, but if you'd really like to see a chamber, this was built in the 60s for the Apollo program and is now a historic designated site. This chamber is designed to emulate the environment of space. It's cold, it's dark, and almost absolute vacuum. It's good fun working at NASA. Seeing things like this is dramatic. I mean, there's no place in the world you can get to see a chamber where the Apollo craft that went to the moon were tested. Australia was a very key component. We had a very keen involvement back in those days. There's a joke we say here, which is the Houston, the first word from space. What I always remind people is the first place it was ever heard was Honeysuckle Creek. If you've ever wanted to go bungee jumping without a rope, then the only place you can really do it is in the KC-135. It's a modified 707. It flies up, does a parabola, and during the parabolic phase, it gives us about 25 seconds of microgravity. It's a bit like a plane going into a stall. And what I'm wearing here, just to show you, is called the KC-135 Carnation. And I have on 2 occasions had people lean across as if they were going to whisper something to me and then vomit into my bag. One of them being a cosmonaut. What I'm doing is I'm just prepping the urine to make it blue, so that when we're bored we'll know where the hell it is and we don't have it running around. No, it's actually not urine, it's just water, but it makes it more exciting if we pretend it's urine. And Dr. Whitson hasn't heard the experiment we're doing this morning, even though it's hers, so I need to brief her on what I think we should be doing. Then she'll tell me what we are going to be doing, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, I've flown once as an astronaut in training, and 2 times as an experimentee, so this will be the first time I've flown to test some hardware.
When we're in flight, we'll probably move to the front 2 seats, but until we're there, we'll sit. Okay, the KC-135 is designed to allow us to actually go up and test things as if they were on board the shuttle or on board a space station or some sort. As you can see, it's got ropes along the side here because for 25 seconds you can be upside down, flying around. The walls are all padded. It's not because I'm insane, it's because you're going to run into them on occasions. And the normal event, you go up, and you'll feel this tremendous pressure on your body as you go through the 1.7 G phase. Then these lights go on, and then you start floating. And it's like the very beginning of a roller coaster ride, but it continues for 25 seconds, and you have nothing holding you down. And most people float freely and move around and then throw up. This is an experiment that Dr. Whitson and I developed. It's a way of collecting urine, and though it sounds very basic, a lot of the science is really dependent on it, and Dr. Whitson can tell you what the science is because she knows more about that part of it than I do.
We're actually doing a study to look at renal stone risk in the astronauts. During spaceflight, a lot of physiologic changes occur in the astronauts, including a fluid redistribution and bone demineralization, so calcium's coming out of the bone. In that process, we have increased calcium in the urine, and hardware that Vaughn and I have developed, we're hoping to test it for early space station flights when the power in the freezer space may not be as great as we would like it to be.
Okay, what Dr. Whitson's now doing is she's emptying a device in microgravity. You can see how the water and fluid all go in different directions. We lost it. Now we're going to try and open the device and insert it into the drying box. And this is not as easy as you might think. That goes in well.
Yeah, that does.
They slide in really well. One of the fun things I get to do is to test the food for the astronauts. Here's a new commercial package. We're just going to make sure it doesn't spurt out everywhere when we open it up. Unfortunately, it looks like vomit, so if I go and eat that up at the other end of the cabin,
Good.
All
Excellent skill. My mother told me never to play with my food at the table, but she said nothing about a KC-135. That's a rough flight. Watch out. Got everything we wanted. Did brilliantly. Ended up with most of the sweet and sour pork over my face in flight suit, which you'll get to see in the video. And it was, the experiment worked beautifully, so we're going to take it up on the Mir. Dr. Whitson's going to email the two astronauts to tell them the hardware worked perfectly.
Yeah,
it was good.
It was good, better even than I expected.
But it was a rough flight. If you've ever seen the movie The Right Stuff, there's a bar that all the flyers had their memorials in, and the place that they all went off to escape publicity. And this is sort of modelled on it to some extent, but this is the astronauts' home. Look around, you'll see memorials to all of the astronauts that have flown, and to the Challenger crew that have died. And as you see people wandering behind me, there'll be people either associated with NASA or astronauts themselves. I was actually invited here to NASA. A lady by the name of Carolyn Huntoon was the director of the Johnson Space Centre. Dr. Huntoon met me at a conference in Australia, in Adelaide, and she asked me what I did for a living, and I explained at that time that I was a professional coward. And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I develop ways of measuring things in people without having to stick needles in them." And she said, "We need you here." And so she invited me over to NASA to build devices for the astronauts, and that's how I got here. Well, Building 56 is my other laboratory. It's where I do mostly medical electronics as compared to biochemistry type research. This is the magnetic cardiography or non-contact ECG system. It's a way to allow us to measure the heart without having to stick electrodes on. It doesn't really look like the finished product at the moment. If you've ever seen Star Trek and watched them in sickbay with the tricorder moving over the body, that's eventually what this will look like, a small torch that monitors the heart's magnetic field. It's very important during spacewalks to be able to tell that the astronauts' heart are working properly, and they don't like wearing the electrodes because they cause ulcers. The importance, though, is on the ground. This device will actually be wonderful for monitoring babies when they're newborn, monitoring people during transport, and during operations. This is the next device we're developing for spaceflight. It's really a way of measuring the bump that's produced by the tuberculosis test. You probably remember sometimes that people get tested for TB by injecting something into their skin. It produces a bump which the doctor feels 48 hours later. It's very hard to feel it in space. The astronauts' fingers are a bit numb and the bumps don't quite work the same way. And we're now developing a device to measure it electrically. This device is actually probably one of the simplest but yet most important. It's called the Integrated Physiological Monitor, or intraoral probe at the moment, and it's a sensor system which is placed inside the external part of your ear and measures heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate and respiratory volume. It's an integrated monitor for monitoring all the things we have to. When I was 8 years old, I was living here in the States with my father, who was at the university in Chicago, and the three gentlemen who had just arrived back from a long journey were on a ticker tape parade, and I got within a hair's breadth of actually meeting Neil Armstrong, and I must confess that shaped the rest of my life. I think this is, in some ways, a memorial, as well as being a very valuable bit of science, to the achievements that humans can make if we pull together, and also a tragic one in my mind in that it's something Australia is no longer involved in. We want to be a pragmatist. It's the things that spin off from space that really give the country economy a kick, and you can't predict them. And I'll give the dry blood as an example. The dry blood has this wonderful commercial market, and it could have easily been made in Melbourne as it was in Houston. There's nothing about the fact that we built it here that was special. And in fact, there's a tremendous number of medical institutions in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane and Adelaide and Perth that would have been excellent places for developing this technology, and it wasn't because we're not involved. And so if I, with the skills and the technology that I developed, wanted to go back to Australia, I'd have to do in some sort of commercial drug company environment. I couldn't do so for the space program proper.
Hey, wait till I say space.
I'm not by any means unique. There are thousands of scientists in Australia that could contribute in all fields of science and can do so from Australia as a land base. They don't need to be here in Houston to do many of the things that we're doing. This is the Cliff tribe. So Jesse's an additional. That's Gareth, Anna, Liam and Esther, and my wife Brenda. It is time for Australian kids growing up to have a chance to take part in one of the most exciting things the planet can do, and that's go and explore the universe. Right behind Jesse. You ready?
That's all for this week. Next week on Quantum, we look at the latest in asthma research. Now, in the last 20 years, asthma has gone from being the reason why one kid couldn't finish the school cross-country into being a disease that affects 1/3 of all Australians. That's Quantum next week. I'll see you then.